Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's reading from Hope. I've actually been doing a lot of live streaming lately with High Point Church, so some of you who are my Facebook friends are either going to get too much of me or stop watching, no doubt. Might be a little shorter than 20 minutes today. I'm only planning to read one chapter. Some of these chapters are a bit long. My chapters were not in any way designed to be the same length all the time, and so generally I want to shoot for 20 to 30 minutes. Yesterday I wanted to get through a chapter and we spent about 45 minutes, but I'm learning this whole read-along thing as I go, and I don't usually read them beforehand to check the time. So today we're just going to do one chapter, and in my opinion, it's a good one. Hopefully, my humble opinion. All right, so, excuse me. Hope, Chapter 7, A Song for the Road. They broke the camp and packed up some pack horses, then mounted the horses Hellel had provided for the journey. They were relatively large horses that were ideal for galloping, and Alva wondered if Hellel expected that they might need to take flight. Pensor could see that his horse was a little large for his short stature. "Prior," Pensor said, "think you could give me a leg up?" "With pleasure," Prior responded. He grabbed the back of Pensor's coat with his left hand and effortlessly lifted him with one arm, sitting him on the back of the horse. "Thanks," Pensor said. "Don't mention it," Prior said with a smile. They began to ride, with Jagrock in the lead and Hellel in the rear. Nira and Hope were immediately in front of Hellel. Shortly after they began, Nira tightened her reins and slowed her horse beside him. "A word, my lord?" she asked. "Certainly." "Are you sure these men are trustworthy?" she asked. "Are you sure they are the sort we need?" "Yes." "But they brawled within minutes of meeting one another." "Now they have orders not to do so." "You believe they will obey those orders for weeks on end?" "They'll do their job. I checked each one of them thoroughly. None of them has ever committed a crime. After talking to them, I trust each one." "So quickly?" "How long had I known you when I trusted you to be Hope's guardian?" "Not long, my lord." "I was right about you. Trust me to be right about them." "But they have no sense of tact, propriety, or chivalry," Nira said. "With the exception of Bonson, I can't trust the lords right now," Hellel explained. "Bonson has been playing sword games rather than engaging in politics. We need men from the outer fringes of society, men with no connection to the politics of the kingdom. I chose which ones I would hire very carefully. I'm sure Alva means you no harm, but if he bothers you, then I can forbid him from addressing you." "I could do that myself if it were necessary. I'd much rather see for himself that acting like a child is beneath his quality." "His quality?" Hellel asked, raising his eyebrows. "He protected a farmer when he had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Without your seal, they could have had a warrant for his arrest, and he'd be a fugitive. There's something about him." "So he may have a chance at some reward besides gold after all," Hellel said with a smile. Nira gave him a stone-cold stare. He understood that was not the point. "Well," Hellel said at last, "are you satisfied?" "I trust your judgment, my lord." "That will have to suffice," Hellel said, concluding the discussion. Their journey had begun. They were headed northeast. The plan was to cross the Delena River at a shallow point where they could ride over and continue on the less populated side of the river. The river would give them plenty of water for their journey. Hellel wanted to avoid crossing at a ferry because he wanted to avoid attention as much as possible. As usually happens when a group of people ride together, they formed into groups and talked. Lord Bonson thought that none of the men were worthy of his company except Hellel, and he knew it would seem inappropriate to try to engage Hope in conversation immediately. So he pulled up his horse and conversed with Hellel. In front of them were Nera and Hope. Nera was lost in thought. She was often lost in thought, especially lately. Hope was enjoying watching and listening to the men. Prior, Kiel, Pintor, the brothers, Philor, and Alva were all becoming fast friends. They rode together in a large group, talking and laughing. It was a loud group, but this was harmless enough in the wasteland between Bracia and the Lacinian plains. Alva spoke very little because he too was deep in thought, but he put in an occasional witticism that made them all laugh. At the front were Jagrock, who was leading the way, and Tombus, who was keeping him company. These two men had formed a fast and silent friendship. Jagrock could not speak, and Tombus did not care for speaking, so they rode together, silently understanding one another. In the center group, Kiel did most of the talking. He had many funny stories that kept them all laughing. Most of these were stories about his various loves. All of them were clearly made up, but he told them like they were true, and no one challenged him. In fact, about half of them were not his stories at all. They came from a book called The Love Chronicles of Jacril the Charming. Alva and Hope took a particular pleasure in these stories because they were the only two present who had read the book. It was a rare book because it had been written hundreds of season changes earlier, and most literate Lacinians considered it to be in poor taste. The book was harmless enough. Most of the stories ended with things like Jacril being caught by an angry father right before he received a long-sought kiss, then leaping out of a window for safety. The Lacinian nobility, however, had no appreciation for this kind of humor. Alva had found this volume among the stacks of his father's many books. His father had told him that he would not interfere if he wanted to waste time on nonsense like that. But something told him his father had read the book as well when he was a boy. Because Alva had read it, he knew Kiel was lying. But it was very funny, and he did not want to expose him and spoil the fun. Hope had read the book secretly. Nera would have never approved, but she had found it in Hellel's immense library. Nera had not known it was there or even that it existed, and she never monitored Hope's leisure reading. Hope's only mischief had consisted of reading books Nera wouldn't approve of, but Nera's standards were quite high. She wanted Hope to read books that she thought were fit for ladies. Sometimes Hope wondered if she really wanted to be a lady. It seemed so boring. While Kiel told his stories, it never entered Hope's mind that he would deliberately deceive anyone. She thought all of them must have read the book and assumed Kiel was telling stories in the first person because he was a master storyteller, which he was. The stories were certainly better that way. Listening to Kiel was delightful for her. She had never met a man like him before. He could keep people laughing for hours on end. They stopped riding long enough to make camp and have dinner before dark. While they cared for the horses and made camp, Philor made them a fine meal of roast fowl. They ate heartily and all slept well. Nera and Hope stayed in a tent together, while Hellel and Bonson slept in tents of their own. And the rest of the men slept in the open air. They were all accustomed to doing this when the weather allowed it, and they preferred to look at the stars rather than a roof of pitch-lined fabric. Because their mission was to protect Hope, she and Nera's tent was placed in the center of the camp. Hellel's tent was on one side and Bonson's on the other. Between the two tents, the warriors slept in a circle between them, 4 on one side, 4 on the other. One of the men would stand watch each night. They would take turns with this duty so that no one man had to lose too much sleep. Alva volunteered to take the first watch. He could go for several days without sleep if necessary. The second morning they had an early breakfast. Helo had packed plenty of dried berries, nuts, dried meats, and hard biscuits for quick breakfast and for emergencies. But Pinsor's wife, despite his protest, had made him 24 quail and vegetable pasties. Not wanting to worry about how to transport them, he shared them with everyone that morning. Pinsor's wife would have been angry to know all her hard work had been used up in a day, and Pinsor didn't have his own emergency reserve of food, but she would have been pleased to hear the pasties praised by all. They began right away. There were several more hours of wasteland before they came to more and more clumps of grass and occasional trees. At first, the trees were thin and sparse, but they gradually became numerous and healthy. They would cross the river around lunchtime, stop for a meal, and then continue. After a while, Prior said, "How about a riding song?" "Who knows a good one?" Filer asked. "Well," Prior said, "in addition to being a famous warrior and wrestler, I'm a bit of a musician. I thought we might sing a jingle of my own composition." "After seeing your wrestling skills on display against Alva," Keel grinned, "I'm a little leery about your music." "If Alva's written a song, I'm all ears," ha ha ha, Prior laughed. "No," Alva said, "but I sure do want to hear yours." "And what is this song about?" Helo asked from the back. "Love," Prior smiled. "It's about my loves." At the mention of love, Bonson unintentionally looked at Hope. She smiled, but not the smile he would have hoped for. Her mind was turning to the idea of Prior's loves rather than any love of her own. She wondered what kind of loves a gigantic man like him would have. "Go ahead," Helo said. Nira seemed quite uneasy, but Hope perked up. She loved songs and love stories, and she was very eager to hear about Prior's loves. Prior began in a slow tune, in perfect rhythm with the clopping of horses' hooves. His voice was very deep, and it was a better male singing voice than most of them had ever heard. Helo and Bonson had heard the king's own minstrels, but Prior was at least as good as the minstrels were. "I know a girl, she lives in the hills. She's got an ugly face, but her smile gives me thrills. Hey, 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 ho, 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 ho." "Now, after I sing the verse, you all sing the hey-hays and ho-hos," Prior instructed them. Hope immediately got a mental picture of Prior romancing an ugly girl in the hills, and she thought it very sweet. He continued, "I know a girl lives down in the valley. She's got a crooked nose, but my spirit she does rally." Then the warriors, excepting Helo and Bonson, sang, "Hey, hey, 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 ho, 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 ho." When they finished this interlude, Prior would give the next verse. "I know a girl lives out in the swamp. Her hand feels warm in mine, though her shoulder has a hump. Hey, 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 ho, 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 ho." "Wow," Keel interrupted. "You sure know a lot of ugly women, Prior." "I figure," said Prior with a grin, "that I'm so pretty myself, I ought to balance things out." Nira had nearly had enough. Hope did not need to be listening to this nonsense. She would insist that Helo put an end to it. Just then Hope said, "I think it's very sweet that a mighty and famous man like Prior would have sweethearts that lesser men would consider ugly or disfigured." The men roared with laughter, but Hope didn't mind. She was glad to make them happy, and she still didn't understand the song was a joke. Nira smiled to herself. What a sweet girl. She couldn't bear to spoil it for her, and so she let it continue. I know a girl lives down by the lake. She's rounder than a ball, but she sure can bake a cake. Hey, 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 ho, 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 ho. Even Lord Bonson chuckled at this one. Nera was the last holdout. I know a girl, she lives on a mountain. Here Prior paused for effect and then sang the next line extra slow and extra deep. Her kiss is very fine, although she drools just like a fountain. All the men laughed heartily, and this time even Nera cracked her half-smile in spite of herself. The second time around, the men sang along with all the verses and had great fun until they reached the Delena River. They were riding on thick grass now. There were many bushes scattered about, and trees were plentiful. There were great oaks and sycamores reaching toward the sky and looking powerful and content. Hope had never seen such big trees in person, and she found them amazing. Once they had crossed, they would be riding through the beautiful Lacinian plains. Their horses splashed across the river, which was shallow and wide here. Then they sat down under a great oak, which provided nice shade. Philor made them a nice, hearty lunch. There was roast fowl left over from the night before, which tasted almost as good cold as it had hot. With this, they had sliced bread with butter and honey. The bread was 2 days old, but Philor knew how to wrap it to keep it fresh. The river was cold and clear, and they all filled their cups from it and enjoyed the fresh water. During lunch, Lord Bonson kept watching Hope. He tried to do so discreetly, but this was hard because he found her so captivating. Usually, every pretty young woman in a given circumstance would watch him, hoping to catch his eye. This was the exact opposite. Hope seemed much more intent on listening to the conversation of Kiel, Prior, and the others. Though Bonson knew she had no romantic interest in them, he was very jealous of the way they held her attention. Hope liked Lord Bonson just fine. He seemed nice, but handsome features were not what most interested in her. He had no color. One thing about him bothered her. He held himself aloof from the other men. Hellel certainly commanded the men, but he did not act as though he were their better. Bonson did. He seemed to think Hellel, Nera, and herself were the only people on the journey worth talking to. Hope loved them all. They were all charming in their own way, and they all treated her with respectful affection. Hope had no siblings. This was like having 9 big brothers to make her laugh and protect her. Surely she was the safest girl in the world. 8 brothers might be more accurate because Pensar acted more like a father than he did a brother. He was old and had 5 daughters of his own. How Hope loved hearing him talk about them. Lord Bonson, of course, did not seem like a brother. He treated her with reverential respect, but he was so formal even in his compliments. She thought she knew what he thought about her, and she hated to think about him making him unhappy, but she felt no spark to match the flame he was carrying. After lunch, they rode on. They went due east now, following the river toward the Kiragan Hills. They were many weeks' journey away. The day was fine, and they were all somewhat full from Philor's excellent lunch, so they rode quietly for a time. After a while, they began to hear sweet music that seemed to softly flow through the air. No one noticed it initially, but it made their spirits soar. Shortly, they realized that Hope was humming a slow tune in rhythm with the horses clopping. In a voice sweeter than anything any besides Hellel and Nera had ever heard, she began to sing. I know a boy, he lives in the hills. He's got an ugly face, but his smile gives me thrills. Okay, we got to use our imaginations here for the beautiful voice. I know a boy lives down in the valley. He's got a crooked nose, but my spirits he does rally. I know a boy lives out in the swamp. His hand feels warm in mine, though his shoulder has a hump. Hey, 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 ho, 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 ho. As she sang, the sun seemed brighter, the grass seemed greener, and the breeze felt cooler. Ordinarily, hearing a girl like Hope sing a song like this would seem very funny. But this was not funny. It was wonderful. Each man saw visions of Hope being romanced by sweet, ugly boys in various geographical regions. These visions were the most wonderful thing any of them had ever seen. All the men felt a happiness they had never felt before. For the first time in his life, Lord Bonsong found himself wishing he was born ugly. I know a boy lives down by the lake. He's rounder than a ball, but he sure can bake a cake. Hey, 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 ho, 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 ho. I know a boy, he lives on a mountain. His kiss is very fine. Right at this point, Nera, who had been lost in thought, came to and interrupted her. Hope, she exclaimed, don't be singing a song like that. I'm sorry, Nera, said Hope. I didn't realize I was singing. Please don't make her stop singing, Tombus suddenly called out from the front. If not that song, let her sing another, please. Hope looked at Nera for approval, and Nera looked at Hope with consent. Then she began to sing. None of the men besides Hellel knew the language. It was High Lacinian. Alva's family had believed that the Old Lacinian was the most ancient dialect, but they were wrong. High Lacinian antedated it. At this point, it was known only by a few, but Hope had been taught it. Somehow, though the men did not know the language, they understood the words. She sang of the sun, and the men realized they never knew how wonderful the sun was. She sang of the stars, and the stars came to life. She sang of the river, and they thought the river more wonderful than any water they had ever seen. She sang of the mountains, and the men all gained a new love for mountains. She sang of love, and they all understood how pure and sweet love could be. This day was a new awakening. None of these men would ever be the same. The world was a wonderful place because there was hope.